The city didn't sleep. It just changed sounds. By midnight, the traffic turned into murmurs, engines humming like tired voices, a soft rain tapping against concrete. From my window, I could see her balcony above mine, one floor up. The light in her apartment was always the last to go out. I didn't know her name then. All I knew was the rhythm of her evenings. The door closing at 9:12. The kettle hissing. The faint, muffled piano track she played from her phone. Something classical, slow, unfinished. My apartment was small, one window, one chair, too much quiet. I painted to fill the space. Faces of people I'd never met, the ocean I'd never seen. But lately I'd started painting lights, city lights, window lights, hers most of all. Sometimes I'd see her silhouette through the curtain. She'd stand there with a cup of tea, head tilted slightly, lost in thought. Always in soft colors, gray sweaters, white shirts, hair tied loosely. There was something about the way she moved, as if she was careful not to disturb the air around her. That first night I saw her properly was because of the rain. The power had flickered out in the building, a blackout that swallowed the whole street. I opened my window to the sound of rain falling off balconies. Then, from above, a beam of light, her flashlight, sweeping across the wet air. She leaned over the railing, tried to see if anyone else had power. Her face caught the light for a second. Calm, focused, older than I'd imagined. She noticed me watching and smiled faintly. Not a polite smile, one of recognition, as if she'd seen me before. "Power's gone again," she called, her voice soft but steady. "Yeah," I said. "Guess the city likes keeping us in the dark." She laughed, quiet, short but real. The kind of laugh that made you want to say something else just to hear it again. After that, we stayed like that for a while, two neighbors framed in the glow of a single flashlight, with nothing but rain and silence between us. Then she said, almost to herself, "I used to like nights like this." I wanted to ask why she stopped, but the words stayed behind my teeth. Instead, I said, "They're quieter when the city shuts down." She nodded. "Yes, maybe that's why I used to like them." The power came back soon after. Lights flickered on across the buildings, erasing the moment. She turned to go inside, but before she closed the door, she looked down again and said, "You live below me, right?" "Yeah." "I thought so. You paint." I froze a little. "How'd you know?" "The smell of turpentine," she said, smiling. "It finds its way through the walls." Her door closed gently after that, but the sound of her voice stayed. And later, when I looked up again, her light was still on, softer now, warmer, as if it remembered something too. That night, for the first time since moving there, I didn't paint. I just sat by the window, listening to the faint music from above, and thought about how some people enter your world without even stepping inside it. Mornings in the city felt like apologies. Everything started too fast. People rushing, horns blaring, footsteps echoing through the stairwell. But above it all, there was her, calm, deliberate, steady. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew her rhythm. By the third morning, I'd memorized the sound of her kettle. It started 5 minutes before mine. A faint whistle through the ceiling, followed by the scrape of a chair. She always played the same soft music after, piano, sometimes a vinyl crackle like rain. It felt strange, how much you can learn about someone without ever speaking to them. I began timing my coffee, so it matched her tea. It wasn't deliberate at first, just comforting, like sharing a moment without asking for it. She worked long hours, I could tell by the lights. Gone by 9, back by 7, always neat, composed. Some nights, I'd hear her keys drop to the floor or a quiet sigh before she turned on her lamp. There was something heavy in those small sounds, the kind of weariness you can't fix with sleep. One evening, I ran into her at the corner grocery store. She was standing by the fruit section, looking at peaches like she was trying to remember if she used to like them. "Hey," I said before I could stop myself. "Power's holding up tonight." She looked up, recognized me, and that soft half-smile appeared again. Thankfully, I was starting to think I'd have to live by candlelight. "You'd probably make it look elegant," I said, lightly, not flirting, just true. She tilted her head, amused. "You think elegance survives in this city?" "Maybe in small apartments," I said, "and quiet neighbors." Her laugh was softer this time, tired but real. We ended up walking back to the building together, grocery bags bumping with every step. She talked about her job, something in publishing, editing manuscripts for writers she never met. I read hundreds of words every day, she said, but none of them ever sound like my own. I wanted to ask what hers would sound like, her words, but the elevator arrived and the question dissolved into the hum of its doors. When we reached our floors, she turned to me and said, "You should come by sometime. I'd like to see what you paint." The offer hung there, warm and unexpected. "I like that," I said quietly. That night, I stayed up late again painting. Not cityscapes this time, not faceless lights, just the memory of her in that grocery store, the way she touched a peach like it was something fragile, the way she carried tiredness like grace. At some point, I realized her light was still on above mine. I wondered if she was reading, or just sitting there, same as me, awake for no reason except that something had shifted. For the first time since I moved into that building, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt shared, and maybe that's how closeness begins, not with words, but with someone existing quietly above you, making the night feel less like a void and more like a sky. It took me 4 days to gather the courage to knock. 4 days of rehearsing things I wouldn't say. "You wanted to see my paintings." I was passing by. "Do you always listen to Debussy at night?" But when I finally climbed the stairs to her floor, my hands felt too heavy to knock at all. Her door was slightly open, the sound of running water and faint music inside. I almost turned back when she called out, "It's open." I froze. Maybe she thought I was someone else. Still, my feet moved before my mind could stop them. Her apartment was warm, candles on the counter, a faint trace of jasmine in the air. She was by the sink, sleeves rolled, rinsing teacups. "You actually came," she said, turning to me with that same soft composure. "I wasn't sure if you meant it." She smiled. I wouldn't have asked otherwise. Her walls were lined with books and small paintings. Not hers, but collected pieces, each one quiet and moody. "You have good taste," I said. "They're all gifts," she replied, placing the cups down. "From people who wanted me to remember them." She looked at me, half smiling again. "Do you paint for people to remember you?" I hesitated. Maybe just so I don't forget myself. That made her pause. The music filled the silence, a soft, distant piano. She gestured toward the couch. "Show me something, then." I pulled out my phone and opened a photo of a painting, the one I'd done after the grocery store, her figure surrounded by pale oranges and city gray. She stared at it for a while, then whispered, "You see people beautifully. Only when they let me," I said before thinking. Her eyes met mine. The air shifted, not heavy, just aware. She walked to the window, looked down at the street, and said quietly, "I used to paint once. Before life got too loud. Why'd you stop?" She turned back, her face lit by the city lights. "Because no one looked long enough to see it." We stood there for a long time, two people, one memory away from something unspoken. Then she said softly, "Would you like some tea?" I nodded, though I couldn't tell if it was tea I wanted or just to stay. We sat on the floor, mugs in hand. She asked about colors, brushes, habits. I asked about her work, her favorite books, why her window light always stayed on. She said, "Because it feels strange turning off the only light someone might be looking for." When I left that night, the rain had started again. She walked me to the door, leaning against the frame. "I didn't expect you to come," she said. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But you did." "Yeah." Something like a smile lingered in her eyes, a quiet understanding that didn't need to be said out loud. As I walked down the stairs, I glanced back once. She was still standing there, one hand on the door, as if waiting for something she wouldn't ask for. That night, I didn't paint either. I just sat by my window again, watching her shadow move above mine, and wondered how something as simple as presence could make an empty room feel alive. That IT began as a habit. Passing by her building at dusk, looking for that faint gold light spilling through her window, proof she was still there, still existing in the same quiet space as me. Some nights, she'd notice. The curtain would move, and a small wave would appear. Casual, almost accidental. Other nights, nothing. just the soft hum of city life and the echo of something unsaid. I told myself it was nothing, that we were just two neighbors who talked sometimes. But the truth had already taken root, quietly, insistently. One evening, I found myself outside her door again. No reason, no excuse. I just stood there listening, the sound of a record spinning inside, the faint scent of rain through the hallway window. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised. "Bad day?" she asked gently. Something like that. She stepped aside, wordlessly letting me in. The apartment was dim, soft amber light, a candle flickering on the table. There was music playing low, something nostalgic and slow. "Sit," she said. "I'll make coffee." As she moved through the kitchen, I watched her, the way her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, the ease in her movements. There was something deeply comforting in her quiet, like the world outside could fall apart, and she would still move the same way. When she handed me the cup, our fingers brushed. A small thing, but enough. The air shifted again, fragile, aware, undeniable. "You shouldn't look at people the way you do," she said softly. "How do I look at people? Like you already know what they're hiding." I smiled faintly. Maybe I just recognized loneliness. She looked away, her expression unreadable. "Loneliness isn't something you recognize," she said. "It's something you carry." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with all the things we couldn't name. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to carry it alone. That I'd seen the way she lingered by her window, as if waiting for something she no longer believed in. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she turned the record over. The soft crackle filled the room, followed by the first few notes of an old French song. "You like this?" she asked. "I don't know it." "You will." She sat beside me on the couch, a little too close, a little too far. Our shoulders brushed once, and for the briefest second, I thought she might lean in. But she didn't. She just smiled faintly and said, "You should go before it gets too late." I stood, pretending not to understand what she really meant. Not too late for the night, but too late for the both of us. As I reached the door, she said quietly, "Thank you for coming." I turned. For what? For reminding me what it feels like to be seen. I wanted to answer, to say something that could hold the weight of that moment, but I couldn't. So I just nodded and left. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streetlights glowed pale against the wet pavement. I walked home without an umbrella, the taste of her words lingering like something half-remembered. That night, I painted again. Not her face, just light. The kind that lingers after someone leaves a room. And somewhere between brushstrokes, I realized, whatever this was, it wasn't going away. Not yet. Days turned into weeks, and somehow we found a rhythm. Small moments stitched into the quiet fabric of our lives. Coffee on her balcony at sunrise, small talks in the stairwell, a shared umbrella on a rainy morning. It was nothing and everything. She'd laugh sometimes when I told her stories from work. That low, soft laugh that didn't sound like anyone else's. And when she smiled, I could almost forget that there was a world outside her apartment. But beneath it all, there was a tension neither of us could name. Something delicate and dangerous, a line we kept walking, afraid to cross, afraid to step back. That evening, I found her sitting on the bench near the old pier. The sea was restless, pushing waves against the rocks as if trying to erase the shoreline. She was looking out, her hair catching the fading light, like she belonged to another time. "You found me," she said when I sat down beside her. "I wasn't looking," I lied. She smiled faintly. "You always are." We sat in silence, watching the sky change colors, blue melting into gold, then slowly into dusk. I wanted to tell her everything, that she'd become the thought that stayed even when the day ended, that I saw her in the quiet between every sound. But she spoke first. "When I was your age," she said softly, "I thought love was supposed to be loud. Big gestures, words you could hold on to. Now I think it's just this, the silence that doesn't hurt." I turned to look at her, but she didn't meet my eyes. She was holding something in her hands, a small seashell, pale and worn. "My husband used to collect these," she said quietly. Said each one carried an echo of the ocean. She smiled without joy. Funny how something so small can hold so much. There it was, that unspoken truth. A life before me, a love before me, a history I could never touch. Do you still think about him? I asked before I could stop myself. She took a slow breath. Sometimes, not the way you think. Then, almost whispering, some people leave, but they don't go away. The words sank into the air between us. I could feel her slipping somewhere distant, into a space where I couldn't follow. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "You shouldn't be alone here." "I'm not," she said, finally looking at me. And for a moment, I believed her. But there was something else in her eyes, the knowledge that whatever this was, it had no future, that we had built something beautiful out of borrowed time. The wind grew colder. A wave broke too close to the pier, sending salt water across our shoes. She laughed softly, brushing the droplets off her coat. "You always find me when I'm trying to forget," she said. "Maybe you don't want to forget," I said quietly. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The sea roared, and the world held still. She turned toward me, close enough that I could see the reflection of the sunset in her eyes. And for the first time, I thought she might kiss me. She didn't. Instead, she whispered, "Don't make this harder than it already is." I wanted to ask what this was, but I already knew. When she stood, I followed her back toward the lights of the town, both of us walking slower than we needed to. Like maybe, if we stretched the silence long enough, we could live inside it a little longer. At her door, she paused. "Good night," she said. "And thank you." "For what?" "For not saying it." The door closed softly, and I stood there, the echo of her voice in the hallway air. There were 1,000 things I hadn't said, and somehow, that was the only way to keep her close. By keeping them unsaid, I could see it had been 3 days since she closed the door with that quiet thank you. 3 days since the smell of her jasmine tea lingered longer than it should have in my mind. 3 days since I'd told myself to stop passing by her building, and failed every time. The city was thick with late summer heat, the kind that makes everything move slower. I left work early that day, carrying nothing but a restless ache. I told myself I'd walk by the waterfront, maybe grab a drink, maybe breathe. But somehow, my feet took me to her street. Her window light was on, that same amber glow I'd come to recognize like a heartbeat. I stood across the road, watching shadows move behind the curtain. And before I could talk myself out of it, I crossed. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, not startled, not unhappy, just quietly surprised. Her hair was tied back, a few strands falling around her face. She wore a soft gray sweater, sleeves pushed to her elbows, and bare feet. "I was making tea," she said after a pause. "You look like you could use some." Inside, her apartment felt the same, books piled by the window, a record turning low in the background. The air smelled faintly of rain and something warm like cinnamon. I sat where I always did, the chair across from her couch, though tonight it felt closer. She handed me a cup, and our fingers brushed, just slightly but enough to make the air shift. It wasn't the first time, but it felt different, like the silence between us had learned to breathe. "Rough day?" she asked softly. "Not rough, just long." She nodded. "Those are the ones that get to you, the long ones." For a while, we just sat there. The rain began tapping against the window, slow, steady, like the world was giving us a rhythm. I looked at her, really looked, the faint lines near her eyes, the softness of her mouth, the way her pulse flickered beneath her throat when she sipped her tea. And I realized something simple, something terrifying. I didn't just want to be near her. I wanted her to look at me the way she looked at the sea, with quiet recognition. She noticed. Of course she did. "What are you thinking?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "That I don't want to leave," I said before I could stop myself. Her hand stilled on her cup. The clock ticked once loudly. Then she looked down, a faint smile pulling at her lips, the kind that carried too much meaning to be casual. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "I mean them," I said. She set her cup down carefully, her hands trembling just a little. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it hard." The rain thickened outside, streaking the glass. She stood and walked to the window, folding her arms, staring into the dark. You remind me, she said quietly, that I'm still someone who can be seen. And that scares me. I stood too, taking a slow step toward her. I don't want to scare you. You don't. You just make me remember what it feels like to want something I shouldn't. We stood side by side, close enough to feel the heat between us. She turned her head slightly, her face half lit by the reflection of the streetlights. For one suspended moment, everything stopped. The sound of the rain, the world beyond that window. Her eyes lifted to mine, searching, asking without words. I could have leaned in. She could have let me. The distance between us was a breath, a question. But she stepped back. Her voice broke the stillness. You should go. I didn't move. Tell me to, and I will. She looked at me, eyes shimmering with something raw and real. I can't, she said. That's the problem. The record ended, the needle clicking softly in the silence. We stood there, caught between longing and restraint, between what was right and what was human. When I finally left, the air outside felt heavy, like even the city knew something almost happened. As I reached the end of the street, her window light turned off, and I realized that sometimes the moments that never happen are the ones that haunt you most. It rained for 3 days straight after that night. Not the kind of rain that cleans the air, the kind that lingers heavy and unrelenting, like the sky itself is unsure what it's mourning. I didn't see her, didn't hear her footsteps above, didn't see the faint light from her window spill onto the street. It was like she'd vanished, folding herself quietly out of my world. And yet, somehow, I could still feel her everywhere, in the way the kettle whistled a second longer, in an empty chair by my table, in the silence that used to be shared, but now belonged only to me. I kept painting. I had to. But every canvas began to blur. Blue-gray smudges of rooftops, faint silhouettes by the sea, and one window that glowed warmer than the rest. On the fourth morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, just my apartment number written in her small, neat handwriting. Inside, one photograph, a view from her window, my balcony below, and a note. Some people pass through your life like seasons, not meant to stay, but to change the weather inside you. Thank you for reminding me what warmth feels like. That was all. No goodbye, no promise, just that, and it was enough to break something and heal something at the same time. Weeks passed. The city moved on, as it always does. I saw her once, from across the street, near the cafe where we'd met that first time. She was with a friend, maybe a coworker, laughing softly, a hand on her coffee cup. When she glanced up, her eyes found mine. Just for a second, not surprise, not sorrow, just that small, quiet recognition that said, I remember too. She didn't wave. I didn't either. But her smile, faint, wistful, was enough. It carried everything that needed to be said, and everything we had both promised not to. After that, I didn't see her again. But every night, I still looked up at her window, even when someone else moved in. And sometimes when the light hit just right, it almost looked the same, that warm, amber glow spilling gently over the street below. People think heartbreak comes in loud moments, slammed doors, raised voices, tears. But I learned it's quieter than that. It's the soft echo of someone's absence. It's remembering how they liked their tea. It's the way your heart pauses every time you pass their street. Months later, I finished a painting, one that didn't look like her, not exactly, but somehow felt like her. The same stillness, the same restraint, the same impossible peace. I called it the lights beneath her window. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lonely looking at it. Just grateful. Grateful that I'd known her at all. Even briefly, even imperfectly. Sometimes love doesn't last. Sometimes it just leaves its shape behind, in the way you see the world, in the way you breathe when you think of quiet places, in the way you learn to love again without forgetting what once was. That's what she became for me. A shape, a silence, a memory that didn't hurt anymore, just lived quietly somewhere behind my ribs. And maybe that's enough. Maybe not every story has to end with togetherness. Maybe some are meant to end exactly like this, with two people who changed each other in all the ways that mattered. Then let the city keep their secret. Sometimes I still look up at her old window, not out of longing, just habit. And every once in a while, when the light flickers just right, it almost feels like she's there just for a second, just enough to remember what it once felt like to belong to someone who never really stayed.